Hello friends! In this video I will show you how to install a copy of Debian in VirtualBox. That is, we're going to create a virtual machine, so you can practice whatever is necessary without any fear. I'm going to assume that you have VirtualBox installed, this program right here that allows us to create virtual machines in any operating system. If you don't have it in your computer, you just have to look for VirtualBox and it will direct you to the website where you can see the current version, and we just have to choose on which operating system we're going to use it, on Windows or Mac or Linux. Okay, you download it, you install it, and then you will have something like this. Okay, VirtualBox is ready. What do we need after we install VirtualBox? Well, we need to download Debian's image. Okay? In Google, we can also search for Debian download, and it will show us a link to choose the distribution or the direct link where we download the most common, which is a CD image. We click on it, and we choose the most stable always, which is the recommended for the systems in production. And as for the architecture, normally the modern computers are 64 bits. If we have an old computer, we can choose i386, but in our case we choose the 64-bit option. And in here it offers us the files that are the images, which we could burn on a CD, or, like in our case, emulate it. The first option is a very basic installation, it doesn't even have a graphic environment. But the one I recommend is this one right here. It has a light desktop, very practical, and it works pretty well. We click on the link to download it. It starts downloading the image, and while it finishes, we're going to create our virtual machine. To do that, we go to VirtualBox, we create a new machine, we click on this blue star, and then we write the name we want to appear on the left. I'm going to write Debian 9. It could happen that in certain systems it won't allow us to choose the 64-bit version, only the 32-bit. That means that virtualization is not set in your system or your hardware, so it depends on what you're using. So you will have to activate it in the BIOS or update, or activate all the characteristics for virtualization in your operating system. A little search on internet will do. We click on next, and here we select, out of all the RAM available in our real computer, the host, how much we're going to dedicate to our virtual machine. Well, I'm going to select in this case 4 GB, which is more than enough. It's not recommendable that you assign too much. It tells you right here, orange is dangerous, and in red, the host can have problems or even crash. Let's always stay in the green zone. And it depends on what we're going to install, we can assign more or less. And we also need to create a folder in our host operating system, which is going to act as a virtual hard drive. We're going to create one right now. And we choose by default its own way of working, its own type of files, the VDI. We click next. And here we have two options. The dynamically reserve is going to increase the size of the folder in our real computer as the virtual machine needs it, or set a fixed size to avoid problems later on. But it could be a waste because we're not going to actually use all that space. So we're going to use dynamically reserved. And we're going to set it, for example, 12 gigas, and this is the name that the folder is going to have for the virtual machine. Click on create, and now we have my virtual machine ready. Let's see if the download finished. Yes, it has. We have our image. Now I'm going to click on settings, and I'm going to set under storage that the CD, which is being virtualized but it's empty, is actually going to contain this image that we just downloaded. We go to downloads, Debian, open, and accept. And what we just did was like inserting a real city into our machine. Now I click on start, and when it does, well, our Debian installation is going to pop up. I'm always going to choose the normal installation because it goes faster. If you want to see the graphic installation, it's exactly the same. Press enter, then next. If we don't see this window, like I said, it is emulating a real computer. So this is a totally real installation. Then we choose the language. We press S to go to Spanish. I click enter. We choose the country. And then the keyboard. The keyboard is very important. We click on Spanish. Of course, it depends on the country you're in. You have to choose your own settings. Okay, now, if you look down here, it tells us that it's reading from the CD, the virtual CD, and this turns green when it's reading from the virtual CD. Here we configure the net, that I'll explain later, and the USB devices. A very important key here tells us which is the host key. It depends on the system. It is important to have it in mind because sometimes the mouse disappears inside and we have to press that key to liberate it. Good. As for the installation, it's going to ask us the name of the machine. I'm going to write Curseame. We are not going to use the domain's name. We can leave it blank or write Curseame, whatever. In this case, we just click on next. This is very important. It's root's password. We can't forget this, because that will allow us to administrate the system. If we lose this password, we're going to have a hard time. We write the password, click next, remember the password. Now it creates a new user without administrator privileges. Why? Well, it's always a good idea to use the system without admin privileges. That way, we don't risk ourselves to damage something important. Or in case we get a malware, virus, whatever, we avoid letting it run with too many privileges. At the beginning, it asks us for a name. Here we can write whatever we want because actually the system doesn't use it. It's just an administrative thing. We can write user account or Antonio Sanchez or whatever. The important one is this one right here, which I'm going to use to enter. I'm going to write student. This is the word, the user's account, the login I'm going to use to enter the system. Click on next, password, and confirm my password. Now the time zone. Here it depends on your country. In my case, I'm in Spain, in the peninsula. I click on peninsula and the installation continues. This part is very important if the machine is real. I mean, how I am going to administer the hard drive partitions, because normally we already have an operating system and Linux we install it in another partition so we can use both. It is crucial not to eliminate any partitions that we are using, okay? In this case, since we don't have any problem, we're going to do it very fast. We're going to select the guided method using the whole disk because we don't have anything to keep. We choose the disk, okay? See how the configuration I set is there, the 12 gigas. And it also asks us how many partitions we want to create. The most simple thing is to use only one partition. Here it tells us the changes it's going to make. It's going to create two partitions, one in which the system is going to be, that is pointed out with a slash on the right, the system symbol. Linux is going to be installed there. And then a swiping area which we're going to use as a virtual memory. This is very important and this is the basic configuration in any Linux system. We say yes. It wants us to confirm. I repeat, this is a crucial step. Make sure we are not breaking anything or damaging the system. And we say yes, so it can start overwriting these partitions, so it can start copying the files. This step asks us if we want to search on the internet to download more packages besides the ones the CD image already has. Also for more recent packages. In this case, I'm going to say no. And then, if it is the case, I will update them myself, okay? Let's make the installation quicker. Let's say no. Just install the packages that are on the CD. In our case, we're going to say yes, we want to participate in the survey. Here we're going to choose what we want to install. We have three options: the desktop environment, our window manager, and diverse utilities. We're going to choose all of them and then click continue. This part is also very important because it is the boot manager, which is the program that selects which operating system starts when we turn the computer on. In our case, we only have one system, but we still need to install the group. So we say yes, we do want to install the boot manager. In which disk? Well, we only have one, so there's no problem. We choose the one that it shows us. If it didn't show us or we had many partitions, we could manually select it in here. In our case, as I said, it can install it on the whole disk. We click enter. Now it finished the installation and it asks us to remove the CD, so it doesn't start with the installation of Debian again when we reboot the system. In this case, it does it by itself, so we just click on continue. So what we're seeing is the boot manager. This is the group. It has a timeout, that is a time limit. If we don't select anything, it chooses the default operating system. We are going to enlarge this window so you can see it better. Now what we're seeing is precisely the window manager. In here we are going to select the user student and the password that we chose. We click enter. The XFCE is going to ask us if we want to create some personalized panels or to create one in blank. I recommend to choose using the recommended configuration so we have something we can modify. If not, we would have to do it ourselves. Here we can choose the desktop's resolution. In this case, we will just leave it as it is. What can we see? Well, the first thing we should do is to install and configure the repositories where we're going to ask for the software packages. I'm going to do everything with the terminal so you can see that you can do that without any problem. The first thing I do is to write su to become admin, to become root, and the password I've chosen in the installation. Now I edit the etc folder apt sources.list. That is the repositories folder. What I usually do is to comment all the lines, and the penultimate, I leave it as it is, but I erase the updates part. I leave all the packages, okay? As I said, this is a very basic configuration. If it were an operating system in production, we will have to leave the updates part and take into account what's about security, but it's going to work just fine like this. If you need more instructions, here is main, which is the main. You could also write country number 3 SD, but for now, it should work fine. If you have a repository in your country that is closer and faster, you can look the location on Internet up and paste it in here. Press Ctrl X, save, and we will have our repositories list. What do we have to do next? Well, we have to see if we have internet. I can look up my IP using IP space A just to see if I have a valid IP. I can also make a ping to google.com just to make sure that I currently have an internet connection. Okay, it answers me, it gives me the IP, so this means that the DNS is working, and it makes the ping, so I do have a connection. That only means that I can use the next instruction, which is very important, apt-get update. It searches in the repositories and it also updates the list of available packages together with their versions. If you notice, there are some changes in Debian regarding other versions. To see the IP, I had to write IPA because the command ifconfig is obsolete, okay? The famous ifconfig. If you want to have it, you will have to write apt-get install net tools. Okay, it will install the net tools. Now that we have all the repositories correctly installed, check again and you will have ifconfig. Alright? I recommend you that when we have these big changes, we get used to the new commands. If they consider that this command is now obsolete, well, we would have to learn the substitute, that in this case is the command IP. Another one that we don't have anymore is aptitude. It's a very common program to install packages. If we wanted it, we will have to install it too, okay? With apt-get install aptitude. Now it is going to make some changes. When we have this kind of configurations, I recommend you to check how many it is going to erase, okay? Because sometimes it erases too many packages and it could be dangerous. As long as they are new or just to update, there shouldn't be any problem. So I say yes, and with this now I have two very common commands in this distribution. And I repeat again, I recommend you to know the basic way and the new way without having to install anything, in this case with apt. And if we want to use aptitude, we can use it. I can use it right now. Aptitude, update, it is going to work without any problems. And with this, we will have our system ready, prepared to learn everything we need about Linux. And more importantly, about the common interpreter bash. In case we want to configure our net, right now we can do two things. Either we click on this icon where we see we have an active connection and configure it there. But as always, I prefer to explain that using the terminal, and I can edit the etc folder, network, interface. Okay, now it shows us the interface that we actually see before, but I can change all the configuration that is necessary, okay? In this case, I will be configuring Network Manager, and in this one, the one I have here in the terminal, it would be a more classical configuration, more system-like. To configure it, I have to know what's the name of the interface. If you notice, a moment ago we used IPA, because now, well, back then it would say ETH0, now the nomenclature has changed too. That's not a problem. We will have to copy, then I make a configuration like we said before, and what would I have to write? Auto. And the configuration, well, this is the most basic characteristic. And then iFace, the same interface, and the protocol iNet. And I could add the DHCP if you have it activated, add the DHCP to the automatic configuration, or I could write static, so I set all the values. What values? Well, the IP. Address 192.168.100.208, for example. Netmask 255.255.255.0, and the gateway 192.168.100.1. And in here I can put the DNS if I have the package resolve-conf installed. If not, I will have to go to the etc folder. Let's save now, and let's go to the etc folder, resolve.com. Alright, here now we have our DNS set. The ones set are by default. I'm going to add this one, and if you notice, it is generated by Network Manager, okay? So if you don't want this to be overridden, you should deactivate it, alright? In this case, we say that this is correct, so we'll leave it like that. The next step, once we have the configuration files, would be etc/init.d/networking restart. Okay, we restart the net so it applies the changes. Right now, the IP that my interface has is this one right here, alright? A private net that VirtualBox creates. And if we go here to networking setting, it tells us that we are working in NAT, alright? There is another way with bridge adapter, this one. That is, there is an exact equivalency between the virtual network interface and the real one. So there isn't any virtualized net, and we will have to use the real information of our network, which is the thing I did. I'm going to restart it since I changed the NAT configuration, and then I'm going to write IPA to see if it worked, and in this case it didn't. Let's restart again. Since the data was correct but it didn't work, what we did was restarting the machine, because when we change the adapter, it's like we change some hardware. So we restart so it grabs all the configuration of software and hardware correctly. So when we type IPA, now it has correctly changed our IP address. If I tested making a ping to google.com, we see that the DNS is working, and the connectivity too. Regarding the DNS, we always have to check the etcresolve.com, okay? Back then, we saw that it was generated with a network manager. I remind you that it is a daemon. It is a process you can manage in here. I can say stop, and this would stop changing my configuration. Above on the right, we see an X. If we recheck our IP configuration, as I say, in etc network interfaces, we have the name of our card, the configuration, we set static. If we want to use our router that we have in a real network, we can set the DHCP. If not, it won't work. And here, in this case, a fixed IP. It is very important to know the router address, the gateway, and then we could use our virtual machine just perfectly.